Hey everyone, it's Carissa over at Sprinkled with Glitter, and I am here with a card project today. I'm going to be using this scrapbook kit. You heard me right, it's a scrapbook kit from Studio Calico. It's from their August release. It's called Hercules, and when I saw this fancy stamp, I just knew I had to have this scrapbook kit. Totally reminds me of that song, I'm so fancy. But anyway, you don't want to hear me sing, so I'm going to go through the papers for you. Now, these papers are 12 by 12, so they're not necessarily proportioned for a card maker, but I do end up using a couple of them on my card today. And so just keep in mind that just because you have a 12 by 12 paper doesn't mean you can't use it on a card. But if you like the feel of these papers, they also have the Squints add-on card kit. And these papers are very similar. Some of them are actually the same. They're just proportioned at a 6 by 6 size, so you can check that out as well. I'm starting out by mounting my fancy stamp onto my stamp press, and I just use the lines on my stamp press and my grid mat to make sure I got that nice and straight because I want to get a nice straight stamping onto this vellum. I'm going to be gold heat embossing it onto the vellum, so I'm going to go ahead and prep the surface using my EK Success powder tool. And that's just going to keep extra embossing powder from sticking to places that I don't want it to stick. So I'm going to go ahead and get that all prepped, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp using some Versamark ink. Now, this is the first time I've inked up this stamp and used it, so when I do that for the first time, I just make sure that I give it a good inking because it doesn't have really enough goop on it to make the ink stick really well. So once I got that all inked up, I'm going to line it up straight onto my vellum. The nice thing about vellum is I can actually see through it to my grid mat and get it nice and straight on there. And so for once in my life, I got a really nice straight stamping of this sentiment onto this vellum piece. Now, because it's a nice solid stamp, I'm going to go ahead and push all over it, make sure I get it really, all the ink transferred to that vellum. And when it stuck, I thought, well, that kind of worked in my favor. So I just went ahead and ran my finger all along that stamp and made sure I got a good transfer. Now, that's not necessarily the right way to do it, but I did it that way today. So once I got that all stamped and I was happy with that, I grabbed my gold embossing powder. Now, I don't know how this happened, but today I actually managed to get my gold embossing powder onto my project without getting it all over my table. So I'm just going to grab that gold embossing powder, cover the whole thing, and once I get it covered, I'm going to use my heat tool to heat emboss it. Now, when you're heat embossing on vellum, you want to make sure that you allow your heat tool to heat up before you take it to the vellum. So I actually am kind of off to the side, letting it heat up really good. And this time I actually flipped it over and I heated from the back first. And you're going to see that embossing powder change from the back. And this helped me minimize the warping. And then once I got it heat embossed on the back, I went ahead and flipped it over to the front and embossed that. And I kind of left that in because heat embossing is just so magical and it's fun to watch. So once I got that embossed, I'm going to bring in my trimmer and I'm going to trim this sentiment down. Now across the top part of this sentiment, I'm going to go ahead and just cut it straight across. But on the bottom part, because I have that Y hanging down, but I didn't want it quite that wide, I'm going to take it and line it up in my trimmer, and I'm going to trim right under that F all the way, all the way to the Y. Once I get to the very edge of that Y, I'm going to lift my blade, I'm going to move it to the other side of the Y, and then I'm going to press it down again and finish cutting that off. So you can see here that I have it kind of cut like these two hanging strips. And then I'm going to finish off trimming that out with a pair of scissors. So I'll just trim around the Y. And then I have kind of a cool look here with a banner with that Y kind of hanging off of it. And that's something that you can do when you have like those loopy sentiments that are hard to make banners out of. So once I got that trimmed around the Y, I'm going to go ahead and make that into a banner end. So I'm just lining it up on my grid mat here and just cutting a slit down the center. And then I'm going to cut from the corner to that slit. And then I'm going to flip it over and cut from the other corner up to that slit as well. And that gives me a really nice banner shaped on the end of my sentiment there. So I knew that when I started this card out, I wanted to have some black lines behind this, but I wanted a more kind of faded out, grungy look. So I'm using this stencil from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of inking behind this sentiment. So I'm just getting that all lined up where I think I will need it. I'm going to bring in my craft sheet here so I don't get ink all over my work surface. And then before I get started, I'm just going to use some Post-it tape to kind of hold down my paper and my stencil as well. And I'm just making sure, once again, that I have this on here straight and that I have it exactly where I want it before I kind of secure it down with a little bit of Post-it tape. You could also use washi tape for this or painter's tape, but Post-it tape is what I had next to me, so I just picked it up and used it, and I tend to do that. So now I'm going to use this little fingertip ink dauber to add some black ink. Now, Memento Tuxedo Black ink is what I'm using here, but any kind of black ink will work for this. And I'm going with the direction of the line so I don't pull up that stencil because it is a little bit fragile there. And I found out that I wanted some like more intense color in the center, and then I drug it out on the edge so it would kind of fade out. And I found out that the best way to do that was kind of to tap in the center and get a really nice concentration of ink in the center and then drag it out on the edge. So I didn't want a solid kind of line here. This is supposed to be grungy, it's supposed to fade out, and so I really concentrated on doing that. Now once I had that all done, you kind of see it behind there, I brought in a few different options for some gold pattern beneath this. I have a couple of different washi tapes, and then I also have this gold glitter tape from American Crafts. And I really liked the way that this looked, and I thought the glitter went with that whole fancy feel. So I'm going to cut down a piece of that gold glitter tape, and I'm going to adhere it right below where my fancy sentiment's going to be. But before I did that, I took my card base there and my fancy sentiment, and I ran it through my sewing machine and just did 3 little lines of gold stitching along the edge. Now to deal with those threads, I'm just going to take my back thread, which is the white one for me. I have white and gold. I'm going to tug on those white threads gently until that gold thread comes back through the back of that project, and then I'm just going to pull the gold threads through. Now what this is going to do is in the end, I'm going to have all my threads on the back of my card project instead of having some hanging threads on the front. So just a way to kind of clean that up. And then to keep them out of my way while I'm working, I'm just going to secure them to the back of my card with a piece of Post-it tape. So I have my gold glitter tape cut down here, and I just kind of trimmed it at an angle to match that banner end. And I'm going to adhere it peeking out beneath the vellum. Now, this American Crafts gold glitter tape and all of their glitter tapes are self-adhesive. And I thought this was kind of funny, so I left it in. This actually took me way longer than what I left in here. But it was so hard to get the backing off of this tape. I fussed with it for quite some time. I pulled in some tweezers. Anyway, I finally, I think it was like a full minute later, got the backing off of that glitter tape. And now I'm going to just line it up with the edge of my card front and adhere it to that. Now I'm using, once again, my grid mat to make sure I get this nice and straight on the cards, because you don't want to have a crooked glitter piece on your card. So use your grid mat if you have one to your advantage. If not, you could use a T-square ruler to make sure you get that nice and straight. Now I thought it would be fun to have that banner piece kind of have a little lift to it. It kind of creates a little bit of shadow. So I just put some foam adhesive behind the widest parts of the embossing. Now there are quite a few wide parts on this, so I was able to adhere this pretty well with the foam adhesive, and you'll see me adding that here. And then for some of them that weren't quite as wide, I just trimmed a little square in half. And once I got those all kind of along the back of that fancy sentiment, I removed the backer pieces, the backing pieces, and then I just stretched that out and adhered it on to the front of my card. Now, that is not something that you necessarily have to do, but it did a couple of things. It secured it a little bit better and kept it from waving around in the wind, and it also gave it a little lift, so you get a little more shadow and definition. Now, I'm playing with the idea of using this gold polka dot washi tape as well. I like the way it looks, but it's a little bit wider than what I wanted, and I thought, well, I'll just trim it down. But then I remembered I actually have this Shape-N tape. This is gold Shape-N tape from Lifestyle Crafts and We Are Memory Keepers, and it comes in a sheet. It's actually much easier to trim down than a flimsy piece of washi tape. So I just took it to my trimmer and I trimmed off a 1/4 of an inch strip of this, and I trimmed it all down to the length that I wanted, and then I just removed a little piece of the backer, adhered it where I want, and I'm going to slowly peel off the backer as I move across my card. Now, if you peel off all the backer at once, it will kind of curl up on you. So be careful. You just kind of want to remove that backer a little bit at a time and adhere it as you go along. So I got that all adhered down, and I'm going to add some of these gold, I think these are called the 24 karat sequins from Studio Calico. I thought this would be another thing that would just kind of add to that fancy look. So I'm taking my matte medium, multi-medium in the matte finish. I'm just squirting a little piece onto my craft sheet, and then I'm going to use my Lifestyle Crafts Quick Stick tool to dunk those into the matte medium, and I'm going to place a few of them on the front of my card. Now, I varied the sizes here. I like varying sizes when you're using sequins and enamel dots and stuff like that. And I ended up putting 5 sequins total scattered out on the front of my card. So you're seeing me just dip them in there and then place them down, and then I kind of hold it down with that clear piece. Now, I really liked the way this was turning out, but I thought it needed some color, and I just love these flowers on this 12 by 12 paper. Now, some of them are a little large, so I'm just cutting this into 6 by 6 inch pieces to start with. And then I'm going to go in with a pair of scissors and just roughly cut around some of these flowers. Now, the first one I'm going to cut out is this one with the leaves here. And you can see that because the flowers are really free-form themselves, you don't have to really take a whole lot of time to do it. So I got that one trimmed out, and I decided I wanted another one, so I'm going to use this single one here and just quickly cut around that one. And I kind of fussed with this. I decided, do I like it? Do I not? I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and adhere them to the front of my card, and if I don't like them, I'll just rip them off later, which is kind of what I do sometimes. So you'll see me add these with foam adhesive right behind that sentiment piece there. I didn't know exactly which way I wanted them at first, so I'm just kind of fussing with that. And then I decided on that. I got both of them in there, and I decided I really liked them, but I wanted another one that was a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to trim just inside the border of this small flower here, and I'm going to tuck that in behind there as well. I'm just going to use a little ATG adhesive to tuck that in there as well, because the other two are on foam adhesive already, and I didn't want it to raise up even more. It would start distorting my sentiment piece. So I ended up loving the way that that looked, but I thought maybe I want to bring in some more color. And so I used this piece of kind of aqua colored paper. I'm going to start out by cutting this down to 6 by 6 because I'm not going to use it in a 12 by 12 piece anyway. And then I cut a piece that would cover my whole A2 card, so it's 5 1/4 by 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Just kidding. And then I adhered the card front onto that pattern paper with a little bit of foam adhesive. And then I'm going to use my ATG gun to put adhesive all over the front of a white A2 card base. And I'm going to attach that whole card front to that white card base. I got a little adhesive booger there, so I was just kind of moving it off. So this is the way that I like to line it up when I have a piece covering my whole front. I like to hold my card base and my card front together and just kind of line them up using my table to keep them level, and then I can push that all down. So that completes my card for today. A very kind of different card for me. I don't know. Do you think it's different for me? I think it's different for me. So as always, you can find links to all the products used in this project in the description at YouTube, as well as over at my blog at Sprinkled with Glitter. You can also find more information over at my blog at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a fabulous day.